Hi everybody, and welcome back to yet another episode of the Stellium Astrology podcast. I'm Stephanie James, your host. I'm also the founder of stelliumastrology.com, tutor at the LSA, London School of Astrology, and former horoscope columnist for Elle Magazine UK. And today we're talking about Sagittarius. I picked out a few charts, a few subscriber charts. We're now in Sag season. We are in the throes of Sagittarius season, and it's a bit more of to start with, Sagittarius is a fire sign, and so that already has that kind of extroverted, more outgoing energy about it, and it's a mutable fire sign as well. So if we think about fire, different types of fires that you can have, the mutable fire, I would have to say, is that little fire, the flame that gets a bit out of control and it kind of travels around everywhere, spreads pretty quickly. And you can say for the sign of Sagittarius that the flame that they carry, you could call it the Olympic flame that travels all around the place, whichever country that it's in. It has to do a sort of bit of a lap of the country before they actually light the flame. The main flame, but also it's that fire of that spark of inspiration which you can get from somebody who helps you to understand something in a new way and ignites that thirst for knowledge. That is kind of what Sagittarius kind of is about. Like I said, they are a fire sign, they are mutable. And it's that time of year where it's technically still autumn. We've just come out of Scorpio season, where we've been in the throes of autumn, really witnessing all the leaves falling off the trees and everything. And now Sagittarius season is that shift where we go from autumn into winter. So by the end of Sag season, that's when we're really wrapped up. Every time we breathe, we're getting that little condensation coming out, that little condensation cloud, and it's chilly, and we're seeking out warmth in the northern hemisphere. I know it's very different in Australia and Brazil. A friend of mine lived in Brazil, and she told me how weird it was having Christmas where it's hot. The winter in Brazil is hot, and same with Australia. Just I can't get my head around that sort of concept. I've never travelled away at Christmas. Have you travelled? Have you travelled anywhere different to your homeland and experienced Christmas in a different country, different culture, different way, different weather? I'd be curious to hear what you think about that. Did you spend Sag season in a different place? I know a few years back I mentioned this in the last episode when I was talking about Scorpio. I talked about my trip to New York. And actually my trip to India. I did that both in the same year, back in 2018. I went to do a conference in India, and I did a talk on the Uranus-Neptune conjunction, which happened in 1993, 3 times. So anybody born in 1993 or anyone who lived through that will have experienced that in their lives. And I did a talk on that subject because it was a particular interest of mine. And then I travelled to New York later in the year, and New York was purely pleasure. And I went with my boyfriend, and it just so happened it was my Jupiter return. And also my boyfriend is a Sagittarius, so I went to New York in November. I think I hear stirring. I went to New York in November, and I had my Jupiter return, so that's when Jupiter returns to the same place that it was when you were born, which happens once every kind of 12 years, and it's usually quite a nice transit. And what I didn't realise was that I was travelling to, this is very complex what I'm talking about, but I travelled to my Jupiter line, which I didn't realise until I'd booked the tickets and looked it up on the map. You can look at different locations in astrology and they bring out certain planets for you in your chart, because obviously as time zones shift, it means that your ascendant shifts as well, because your ascendant is very time specific. So when I travelled over to New York, it put Jupiter on my midheaven, and that made Jupiter the most prominent planet for me in my chart. It was the most visible. It was the planet highest in my chart, highest in the skies. So I had a very Jupiterian time, and it was just like being in this absolutely multicultural melting pot that New York is, trying different foods, understanding a city. It's like London, understanding a city that was built on lots of different cultures and immigration, people coming from all over the place and settling and bringing their history and mainly their food was the feature for me, trying different foods from different cultures and seeing how this amazing city had been built on lots of different cultures, and the immigration played a really big part in it. But on top of that, we went to like museums, and we went to see the New York Giants play in the MetLife Stadium, and we travelled to the Meadowlands to do that. We were going to do a Sopranos tour, but we didn't in the end. But we travelled all over the place. It was such a fantastic holiday, and I always look back and I always have so many fond memories of that. It was just so great. I could totally live in New York. I could absolutely 100% live there. And we went over there when it was Thanksgiving as well. So we had this whole amazing experience of being with people in New York, with the Americans while they were celebrating Thanksgiving, and we had an amazing meal. It was just one of those things where I really experienced another culture. And even though, you could say, well, people that live in America are European, and the English that migrated over there and sort of like settled there, but it's culturally different to where I come from, and I enjoyed it so much. Even down to little things like the way that they call things, different things like what we would call a scone or a scone, depending on where you are in the UK, is what they call a biscuit. I was like, what? They gave me a biscuit with my Thanksgiving dinner, and it was a scone. And, crisps are chips, and, there are just lots of little things that just a little bit different, but it's just really interesting. The other thing that me and my boyfriend found really interesting was like how the toilets there are just so gappy. Like you close a cubicle and there's like gaps down the side. It's almost like, it's not quite a saloon door, but there's a gap at the bottom of the door so you can see the people's feet, and at the top as well. And so you feel quite exposed when you go into the loo, which we thought was odd. And when I went to the Giants game, they had in the ladies' toilets, which were heated, which I was so grateful for because it was freezing. They had toilet seat, like a piece of paper that you pull out and you put on top of the toilet seat. I was like, oh my God, this is a Virgo's dream. This is like my mum's dream, going somewhere where they actually provide like a toilet seat covering so you don't have to sit on the toilet seat itself. Like Phoebe and Friends, she gave one of them a gift as toilet seat covers, which I'm telling you now, if she'd have given me that as a gift, I'd have been so happy. Maybe that's my Scorpio moon speaking, kind of like getting grossed out by toilet seats. But yeah, I've kind of gone on a bit of a waffle about New York, but for me that was a different culture. Have you ever been on holiday, experienced a different culture, maybe at a time when they're having their holidays and you're seeing a different side of things? I never really got the fuss about Thanksgiving, but now I get it, and it's a really wonderful time. And it's just really, the other thing about New York was just everybody was so lovely. I heard so many bad things about people being rude and this, that and the other. When I got to New York, I was so surprised. Everybody was lovely. I just felt like I had come home. I really did. And Jupiter is I think that America has Sagittarius rising. So I think that the Declaration of Independence was signed on the 4th of July. Oh gosh, I don't know the date in my head. I think it's like 1770 something or 1776 or something like that. Oh gosh, I'm going to have to add that now to my list. I must remember to put the chart for New York's chart in the America's chart. So either way, the agreement was signed, and America has a sun in Cancer, in patriotic Cancer, and it also has Sagittarius rising, and I cannot remember what the moon is now. That's really annoying. But yeah, Sag rising. So, and I think it's 12 Sag rising as well. So me going out there with a Sagittarius who has Jupiter rising, and I had my Jupiter return and my relocated chart had Jupiter on the midheaven in Sagittarius. So I really had this Sagittarius experience when I was there. Now the glyph for Sagittarius is the arrow. It points up. If you're looking at a square, it's pointing from the bottom left to the top right corner, and it can describe, or is kind of depicting, the arrow that the centaur carries and puts into his bow and fires off. And it can kind of describe that there's a bit of a gung-ho nature about Sagittarius, and a little bit of a spontaneous and unprepared aspect, where I think of Sag as a little bit like, you could look at Katniss from the Hunger Games, though she's a bit too gloomy to be Sag for my liking, or anybody who does a bit of archery, where they're holding the arrow, maybe quite a few, Legolas from Lord of the Rings, Orlando Bloom, who's Katy Perry's partner, who we spoke about in the Scorpio episode, but holding all those arrows and then just firing them off really quickly. And obviously you can be very precise, you can have precision, and you can hit the spot that you're really aiming for in the future right ahead of you. Having that ability to see that almost long view, that kind of eagle vision, or you could just fire arrows in any direction and just hope they hit something, which is sometimes what Sagittarius does. They can be incredibly precise and know exactly what they're aiming for, or they can just fire things into the mist and just hope something hits. And if we think of those arrows, maybe they could be flaming arrows with that mutable fire aspect about them, and knowing that they're going to hit something and probably catch on, is a little bit like, for example, a Sagittarian symbol, maybe a preacher standing in, an auditorium, talking about the subject he's passionate about, preaching about whatever he's preaching about. Let's say it's somebody talking about astrology. Maybe it's me. I'm here preaching about astrology on this podcast, and my words are those little arrows that are flying out, and they're hitting certain places all over the world. Actually, this podcast is reaching, and that little fire of inspiration happens to be catching a few people all over the place. Now, for me, when you guys get in touch and tell me you're enjoying it, that's the first I know of it, and suddenly my mind is with you guys wherever you are. If you're in Australia, if you're in New Zealand, if you're in Brazil, Mexico, California, Canada, Wales in the UK, I'm hitting lots of different places, and it's that kind of reach that Sagittarius has. It can go global. So it's quite an interesting concept, because Sagittarius is definitely about the bigger picture. It's definitely about reaching far. It's about breaking boundaries. It's about going beyond. And whereas Scorpio was that sign of, that kind of fixed, icy kind of underworld sign that, it has to kind of deal with the depths. Sagittarius is like a hot air balloon that flies up and up and up, instead of being down in the depths and down, scraping the bottom of the barrel, or maybe the bottom of the ocean if we're thinking about somebody who's trawling the sea floor. Sagittarius is in the complete opposite direction. He's up in the sky. He is thinking about how much higher he can go, and enjoying the openness and freedom that letting go can provide. Scorpio likes to hold on. Sagittarius needs to let go. And I think that the reason why Sagittarius lets go is because they know how difficult and damaging it can be if you hold on to something. And so they're not really a sign that holds a grudge. Sagittarius is generally quite forgiving, and they are, so you may have seen Sagittarius depicted as the centaur, which is half man, half horse, and that kind of is a kind of nod to the animalistic nature of Sagittarius. There is this, this kind of human, rational kind of attitude, but there's also this raw animal nature that Sagittarius also has to deal with, which is a kind of battle between their desires and kind of what they what they want to do, and kind of what they know they should be doing. So there can be a kind of a moral battle sometimes, a battle of discipline. And Sagittarius isn't really known to be a sign with too much discipline because the animal nature can take over quite a lot. So discipline is really more of a Capricorn thing. Sagittarius is more of a, I want to say live for the moment, not necessarily living for the moment, in a kind of Buddhism kind of way, or in the way that I kind of see Taurus as living right now, currently, fixed signs generally, living in the now. Sagittarius is very much about, future planning and seeing ahead and having that vision. But they do have this ability to throw caution to the wind, and they just say, to hell with it. Yeah, let's party. Let's do this, let's do that. I'm very, like I said, spontaneous. So they can be a little bit, they can be a little bit inconsistent sometimes as well. Most mutable signs do have an element of inconsistency about them, which we can also call flexibility, adaptability, which is a very good trait to have. But they also tend to be, they can chop and change quite quickly. To give you an idea, Sagittarius is really a sign that is kind of connected to politics and politicians. And if you think about the way that politicians chop and change what they're saying, and I don't think you understood what I meant there, and actually this is what I was trying to say, is this kind of saying something and then adapting it, changing it, and it being maybe backing one policy and then changing their mind and completely going against it. Whether it's like the same week or in a few years down the line, there can be, like I said, that inconsistency, that mutability with Sagittarius is quite obvious. When you meet a Sagittarius, they kind of go with however the mood takes them sometimes. Now, this may not be the case with some Sagittarians who have a lot of fixity in their charts in some places. So maybe you've got a Saggy Sun, but you've got a lot of stuff in Scorpio, which obviously then you will definitely be a bit more committed and a bit more decisive. But with a Sagittarius, with a strong Sagittarius flavour in the chart, there is a need for exploration, for travel, for experiencing new things, for experiencing the unknown, in the sense of maybe booking a ticket to go travelling somewhere without having really any plan of where you're going to go, and just deciding, that's it, I'm off, I'm going on a holiday, I'm going travelling to find myself. And generally Sagittarius is connected with long distance travel. It's the kind of the travel where you have to literally get into a plane or onto a boat and go to a new place and step onto virgin territory for yourself and kind of feel it out and try the different delicacies and hear different accents or maybe completely different languages that you're not familiar with. It's that kind of learning about something new, and they like to come back and tell stories about where they've been. So Sagittarius, just like Gemini, and they are opposite signs, they are both storytellers. Now, Gemini is a storyteller in as much as they like to bring experience into it and tell you about how something might have, they might have learnt about something through what they've done, and it's maybe connecting you to local organisations, being involved in local groups, local communities in some way. Sagittarius is going to be the sign which makes the bigger connections. So like I said, Gemini is the who, what, when, where and how, and Sagittarius is the why. So Sagittarius likes to make the bigger connections, the more overarching connections, and I think that with Pisces and Sagittarius, both Jupiter-ruled signs, there's a real searching for meaning, whereas with Virgo and Gemini, there's a real searching for understanding and making sense of things. So Sagittarius is connected with higher education, and that like kind of adult learning experiences, whether that's through university or whether that's through travel or whether it's actually through substances which expand the mind and develop your understanding of the world in a different way. So the travel could be astral, the travel could be internal travel, that kind of development process. which is why, it could be education as well. So if we think about when you're at school, you're making sense of lots of different subjects and you're learning, like I'm talking early day school right up to sort of high school, where you're learning about subjects. You're gathering information and you're learning not just about the subject, but actually how to present it in an academic way, starting from very early and right up into your more adult phases in school. But you also have that is preparing you for like college and university. So college is like that transitional period where you're going into more specialist subject, and then university is where you kind of pick your subject, where you really, really go into it. And this is where you're learning not just about making sense, which is kind of like the very Gemini aspect of school, that kind of making sense of a subject and making sense of many subjects and understanding, labeling things, exploring them. But Sagittarius is kind of where you go deeper, and when you get into your own dissertation, this is about learning how to really teach yourself how to question in an academic way. But Sagittarius is a sign that is connected to questioning, and it asks the bigger questions in life. So it's not just about writing a dissertation or asking the what we've got the Gemini questions of who, what, when, where, how, but Sagittarius really wants to know why. Why are we here? Why do we do things the way we do? So it is also connected more. It's kind of more scientific as well. It's not necessarily completely connected to science, but it is connected to science. And asking why does this work the way it does, and wants to get into kind of understanding things on a bigger level. And in the same way, Sagittarius can be connected to religion and spirituality as well, where, I know plenty of Sagittarians who, believe in something, but they don't really know what they believe in. So some Saggis I know would consider themselves to be agnostic. I know some atheist Sagittarius as well. I know, I'm not saying that they are predestined to be religious or whatever, but there definitely seems to be a connection with understanding that there is something greater, whether their belief is that, more of an atheistic scientific perspective, that the greater thing, that bigger picture thing. So I've got a cat pushing on the door. That bigger picture thing is to do with, the magic of reality. Richard Dawkins wrote about the magic of reality. I think actually Richard Dawkins is a Pisces, which is another Jupiter-ruled sign, but we'll get into Pisces another time. You've got that magic of reality, where the reality is a really incredible, almost spiritual experience in itself, that kind of amazing connection with nature. Or perhaps there is something deeper and more meaningful in those patterns in nature. Sacred geometry being kind of perhaps the language of God, and that universal presence where you can see spirals in galaxies, and that the way that the water spirals down a plug hole, the macro versus the micro. There's a real bringing together of that spirit and substance. So Sagittarius has a habit of provoking us in a way that we need to learn, or at least explore things in a bigger way. Perhaps we have to go deeper to go bigger, or perhaps we have to go higher to go deeper. So it's sometimes you can look at Sagittarius as the party sign, and I would definitely say, in the period coming up to Christmas, if you think about the fact that there's all these Christmas parties and people are really in a good upbeat mood. I was talking about my experience in New York and everybody being lovely. It was Thanksgiving when I went there, and I think that you get a sense of that kind of, Sagittarius season, that kind of sense of forgiveness and, giving thanks, appreciation, gratitude. Now, that kind of carries through party season on the build up to Christmas. Now, I'm not saying 2020 is going to be a very different experience, but I don't know, maybe it won't. Like, it depends whether or not we're in lockdown, but there could be a lot of people going out doing Christmas shopping and hustling and bustling and getting at each other's throats and fighting and arguing. Generally, I try to stay away from the shops when I do my Christmas shopping. I'm an online shopper more, but that's probably because I've got Venus in Aquarius. But, those people that do go out to the shops, maybe just coming up to Thanksgiving and Christmas, maybe you're a little bit more forgiving, maybe you're a little bit more understanding of other people, but also everybody's excited about, it's that the reset that we get, the solstice, which I think of like the yearly reset that we get, and Christmas is that kind of, we've rebooted, we're reconnecting, and we're going to restart, refresh, and then we get the new year following. So we've got that little period where we're all allowed to have some proper downtime at the time of the year where, the sun is at the lowest point in the skies, and we're cold, we're chilly, and that's the beginning of Capricorn season. But just before we've got all that, we're partying, we're having our Christmas parties, we're meeting up with friends, exchanging gifts before Christmas with certain people, just full of like this happy spirit. Sometimes people doing Secret Santa, some people don't celebrate Christmas at all, but there are still aspects of this time of year where we are in a more charitable mood. It's a nice time to be a human when you go through these kind of big festivals with other human beings. So it's definitely a sign that I associate with having a party. Problem with Sagittarius, we've got Scorpio who goes to extremes, like I said before, so they can be really full on into one thing and then into another and get really intensely involved. Sagittarius is kind of a to hell with it attitude, and they just think, yeah, screw it, why not? Let's do this, let's do that. They're quite optimistic, and they may tend to, they do tend to struggle with having an off button. The off button doesn't really work with Sagittarius. Like, they are the limitless, unbounded kind of sign that just wants to keep reaching higher. So they may be the person at the Christmas party that just has that one too many. They don't really know when to stop. And it's good when you meet a Sag who does have a bit of self-control. I do know a few Saggies who do have self-control, which is a positive thing, and their off button may struggle to work in other aspects of their life. Maybe they're a bit more preachy, or maybe they are the type that just want to keep talking about their holidays all the time, or maybe they turn every opportunity they can into teaching, like I do. I'm not a Sagittarius, but I do have 3 planets in Sagittarius and my descendant as well. So I have got, I guess you would call a stellium in Sagittarius. Then it's not a triple conjunction, but I do have 3 planets and an angle in Sagittarius. So there's quite a relatively strong Sagittarian emphasis in my chart. And I am a natural, Jupiter sextiles my Mercury placement, so I am a natural teacher, I think. I just like to talk to people and help them understand things, particularly astrology. I'm somebody who kind of has a knack for an analogy as well. So I think that maybe Sagittarians are really good at packaging subjects. So Gemini's gift is to really simplify things and make it accessible to a lot of people. And I think Sagittarius has also got a similar gift. But not only do they have that gift of, I don't know, translating or interpreting something complicated into a more accessible subject matter, they also have the ability to spark that passion in other people and inspire them to want to explore things on a deeper level. There are drawbacks to Sagittarius. Like I said, they don't really have an off button. They believe there's an element of faith involved with Sagittarius, which can lean towards perhaps having too much good faith in other people sometimes, believing that their friends are really their friends when actually they're just hanging around for the good times. I've got one friend who is a Sagittarius. He is a total party animal, and he's very, very, very generous. It's a very generous sign. And we'd go out and he'd put his hand in his pocket. He'd always be prepared to pay for everybody. And though it was really lovely of him to do that, it was also a little bit, I don't know, he just didn't really, he did it without thinking. And I think he did it because he knew that people were hanging around with him because he liked to have that crowd around him. They're very sociable Saggies. Fire sign is, they're very outgoing, they're very sociable. And he went through a period of his life where his family, his wife kind of left him, and his whole life kind of changed, and it became apparent that he'd got a bit of a drug problem, and he was an addictive personality, which is something that could be said for Sag. They can get a little bit addicted to things. They can be a bit addictive personalities sometimes. And it was my ex-boyfriend always used to say, it's just castles built on sand. Castles built on sand. And if you think about that mutability aspect, sand is quite a mutable substance. And I thought that's a great way to describe that kind of Sagittarius trying to build things up and have like this, have a life, have a house, have a respectable job. If it's all built on sand and the sand's going to drain away someday or get washed away, it's kind of not really built on anything at all. And I think that was the problem with this really optimistic Sagittarius that I knew. He allowed his off button, he never got the off button fixed. He was deep into addiction. He alienated a lot of people. He alienated himself, actually, and I think that he had a bit of an awakening when he realised that the people that were hanging around with him all the time and being besties with him disappeared as soon as the going got tough. And it was a bit of a rude awakening for him, and he struggled with that shift. And sad as that story is, that is probably something that a few Sagittarians might be able to identify with. Not necessarily waking up to delusion, but definitely waking up to the fact that, generosity attracts a certain type of person. As beautiful as being generous can be, a lack of boundaries, a very party-going, optimistic attitude. Anyone who's been a bit of a party animal in the past and likes to throw caution to the wind and just party will have probably learned at some point that the people that are there for you during those times are the ones, they won't be there in a crisis. They're there for the good times. So that can be very difficult for Sag to kind of understand and learn about. And Sag can also be, if we think about the kind of the rising quality of fire and how it carries embers up with it, these little ashy little embers flying up in the fire, there is a kind of no roof kind of aspect with Sag, and they do just want to keep going higher and higher and higher. And that can translate to their communication style as well. They can lift people up with their language, but they can also overblow things sometimes. They can be a little bit well, who was it? I think it was Melanie. I heard this from Melanie Reinhardt, who is an aspect. Melanie Reinhardt is an expert on Chiron, and I went to a talk of hers a few years back, and she called them Exaggattarius. But I believe the astrologer who coined the term Exaggattarius was Rick Levine. Now, Sagittarius, they do tend to exaggerate things. Literally, they will make things out to be so much more than they are sometimes. Not necessarily like drama queens like Leo, maybe. Yeah, but perhaps they are being a little bit dramatic. Maybe there's a bit of drama about the fire signs. I think I did say that in the fire episode. There is some kind of drama about fire. Whereas Leo kind of embodies that drama and becomes the actor, the thespian. I think Sagittarius exaggerates and tells big stories sometimes. So sometimes we can wonder if actually they've stretched the truth a bit, and sometimes their stories are a bit more bombastic than actually they were originally. Those people, I guess you had to be there. But did it really happen? I'm not calling them liars, just they like to embellish sometimes. It's not a bad thing. Stories can be boring. We can need to spice them up a little bit. There's so much about Sagittarius that we could talk about. They are lovely, they are honest, they are very open. They do put their foot in their mouth sometimes. If we think about foot and mouth syndrome, what I'm talking about is people that say the wrong thing at the wrong time. Oh gosh, I just know so many Sagittarius that I just know who've just said the worst possible thing at the worst possible moment, but they seem to get away with it because they're so that you know they're coming from a good place usually. They're usually very kind-hearted, and very it's just not meant in a malicious way, and it's very obvious that that's the case. But they can just say the wrong thing at the wrong time. I've got one person in my life who tends to repeatedly do this, and she is a Sag. And we used to go to a place in Wiltshire where there were lots of crop circles. We went to this place called the Crop Circle Cafe, which was like a kind of crop circle mecca that had all like key rings and magnets and stuff. And we went there to check it out. And one of the guys that run the shop, I can't remember now. I think I'd showed her a video. I used to kind of be interested in crop circles, and I kind of got involved with that scene for a while. I don't think I should say too much. I might incriminate myself, but let's put it this way: I have been out and I have made some. So I've revealed a lot about myself today. But we went to this crop circle cafe, and my Sagittarius friend was talking about a video she'd seen with a guy who's a crop circle researcher and knows all about this and has contact with these balls of light and all this sort of stuff. And my friend went, "So where is this guy?" And sort of like name dropped him and started going on about how much of a div he seemed. And I looked at her and I went, "He's right behind you. He owns this shop." Like, only a Sag could be that blasé, and just come out with something like that. And it was so hilarious. Like, I don't know if he heard or not. I have no idea. But it was just this kind of moment where we all, that moment when somebody says something they shouldn't in front of the person they shouldn't say it in front of. And it was like, oh my God. You want the world, the ground to swallow you up. There was another time with my sister who's got a Sagittarius moon, and she's notorious for putting her foot in it. And we went out to a club, and there was a girl there whose nickname was, I can't even say it because it would just, if it ever got back, it would be awful. But it was a nickname that not everybody knew, and it contained the words venereal disease. And my sister went, we met this girl, and I went, "Oh, this is so-and-so." And my sister went, "Oh, you're so-and-so venereal disease." And we were like, oh my God. I didn't come up with that nickname. It was just what she became known for. And I looked at my sister and I was like, oh my God, are you serious? Did you actually just say that to her face? And I'm sure the girl knew that was her nickname, but it was like that kind of thing where you don't say that. So yeah, Sag has that thing where they just open their mouth and the words fall out, and then they suddenly, I don't even think they feel, Scorpio is a sign that's very connected to like humiliation and shame and embarrassment. Sagittarius is kind of like a bit like Teflon when it comes to that sort of thing. It just kind of like drops off of them. They don't tend to really go for that embarrassment. They don't really hold on to those kind of things. So that's quite a positive thing for Sag. But yeah, there's, other things about Sag is they can be a little bit pompous sometimes. They can be a little bit, I've travelled, I've done this, I've done that. And they want to tell stories about their life. And it's a little bit, not necessarily self-absorbed, but they definitely like maybe talking about their experiences and teaching everybody without being asked. And it's patronising sometimes. But, generally it comes from a good place. We all have good signs, good aspects and bad aspects to our personalities. But anyway, let's have a little look and see who I've got to talk about. My subscribers, who have I got? I've picked out a few. Here we are. Okay, so I have my little charts in front of me. And we have got, I've picked out, there is a few people here. So I've got, she is not one of them. Well, we do. I've got Rhiannon, and Rhiannon has got a sun in Sagittarius and Venus in Sagittarius, but then a stellium in Capricorn. So they can be a little bit more cautious. Those Saggies who have a Capricorn stellium tend to be a bit more cautious rather than adventurous. I know that because I live with a Sag sun and Capricorn stellium guy, and he is he is Mr. Caution. Like, he's very aware. His son's in Sagittarius, so he does have that gambling aspect to his personality. He believes good faith in everything. He does have an off button because of that caution element. There is an off button involved with that kind of stellium. There is a ability to say no, whereas Sag would tend to say yes a lot of the time to things. So I'm going to talk about Katie, who has got Sun, Uranus, Sun, Uranus, Venus, Mercury, and Neptune in Sagittarius, all sitting at the bottom part of the chart. So this might describe somebody who comes from a home that was quite spiritual in some way, or maybe the house where they came from may have grown up in a different country and then moved. So different cultures were part of their upbringing and part of their life story. And maybe they were, maybe their parents, maybe Katie, your parents have always talked about their experiences abroad. Perhaps they're quite religious people. But there definitely seems to be an aspect of learning about things that are beyond and far away, and inspire your spirit in some way to want to explore these areas. Now, actually, interestingly, you've got Chiron in Taurus in your 9th house, and this happens to be the 9th house actually happens to be connected with Sagittarius and travel. So I wouldn't be surprised actually if there is an area or aspect of maybe a little bit of fear about actually doing the travelling yourself. And maybe you've done a lot of self-education, learning about yourself, learning about who you are, and really travelling within. But travelling and exploring overseas, that might feel like it's something that maybe you're not prepared to do as much because you've got areas of limitation around that, or perhaps you feel stuck in some way. I just think that having Chiron there in your 9th house kind of it does limit in some way your ability to really play with ideas around exploring bigger picture ideas. So if there's something else perhaps I didn't mention, was that Sagittarius is about spreading a message as well, in a way that it's connected with broadcasting and maybe even like media and possibly even social media, publishing and that kind of thing. And somebody who's got all of this Sagittarius stuff on the 3rd and 4th houses is somebody who's probably driven to writing a lot and communicating their experiences, and perhaps their past, and perhaps learning about their past is an education. And perhaps with Chiron in the 9th house, it could be somebody who writes about their personal painful experiences, and maybe shares that by writing a book that is about healing in some way, healing from the past lessons, that kind of thing. So maybe, Katie, you can relate to that. There is I think with Sagittarius as well on the 4th house cusp, family may have an international feel. So it might be that you come from a bigger family that's all over the world, and perhaps there's the Neptune and Sagittarius generation generally tend to be extremely they have a kind of a global attitude towards life, and very forgiving of lots of different belief systems and points of view. They kind of understand that maybe it's even bigger than that, and actually that everything that everybody believes in individually is actually connected at a higher source. And maybe with this generation and with this kind of 4th house cusp Sagittarius message that you're carrying, I get a sense that maybe you are your family may involve a lot of people who are either married in from different cultures, so you experience different cultures through your upbringing and family life. You also have Jupiter in Scorpio opposite Chiron, which again brings me back to this Chiron 9th house, 3rd house. Communication might have been difficult for you growing up. Saying what you really wanted to say might have been difficult. And there could have been some secrets around the past. Maybe the international feel wasn't something that was discussed, or maybe there's something in your past that was kind of kept hidden but was revealed. And with this Chiron in the 9th house, it's something that you can't change about your past, but actually it's something that you can help other people get through. I just get that feeling from your chart. And you have got a lovely service orientated, helpful Virgo ascendant, which is somebody who wants to help other people in some way. So Katie, that is your chart. And LeFlora, I love your name, LeFlora. You have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, another person with 5 planets in Sagittarius. Okay, so LeFlora, you have basically the same planets as Katie, but you were born 3 years later. So Katie has Uranus, Sun, Venus, Mercury and Neptune, and you have, in this order, Mercury, Saturn, Venus, Uranus and the Sun, and Neptune has moved into Capricorn. So the Neptune experience of that kind of understanding of different religions and things like that, having an overarching connection, maybe you don't identify as much with that, but actually when I think about Neptune in Capricorn, I think about having a structured spiritual practice. So things like yoga, where you can have a structure in your day and you can visit your spirituality on a regular basis and have some kind of framework there in order for you to connect to that spirituality. That definitely feels much more Neptune in Capricorn for me. There's a lot of things about Neptune in Capricorn, but I won't go into it now. Oh, you also have your ascendant in Sagittarius, and by all accounts, you have your sun rising in Sag. Now, is your birth time correct? Because if it's not, then it could change your ascendant, but it doesn't take away from the fact that you still have 5 planets in Sagittarius. You may, if your birth time is correct, you have got a lot going on in your 12th house, which gives you a very it adds to that spirituality feel, actually. And it also, you may have been involved in some self-destructive behaviour. The 12th house can be a little bit where we undo ourselves in some way, and this can create a sense of learning about, perhaps maybe you will identify with that, my friend's story, where he kind of had the wrong kind of friends, and you had to learn maybe that, could be a bit more selective about who you hang out with. I'm sure you've got you've got Pluto, Mars Pluto in Sagittarius in your 11th house, so I'm getting this sense of some friendships of people who are abusing their power, and perhaps disempowering you in some way. You have to realise that you hold a lot of power to inspire somebody to want to do that to you. So be aware of your own power there, because you've got an amazing conjunction there. And I would say that you are somebody who should definitely get involved in some kind of ritualistic practice which allows you to connect with your own personal power. Some might get involved in martial arts with this type of thing and get into like karate or something which teaches you discipline and teaches you about how to assert yourself without abusing your own power. But I'm definitely getting vibes here that maybe you were bullied when you were younger and you've had to tap into your own personal power. But first you had to, by tapping into that, you may have realised that you could be a bully yourself if you wanted to. And it's about realising that gentle, forgiving and very beautiful aspect of your Sagittarius personality, which is very forgiving, probably to your own detriment sometimes, could lead you down the wrong path with the wrong people. And it's about readjusting your perspective, understanding that no is a perfectly acceptable word to say to certain people, and tapping into trying to understand that it's, you need to tap in. Once you've accessed and understood your personal ability to inspire and to lead and to follow your own true passion in life, you're really going to unlock what is most important to you and what's going to inspire you. You're probably somebody who I can see a bit of a cult leader here as well, somebody who probably has a lot of people. Maybe you've got a lot of copycat friends. You go out and buy something and then they copy. But you've also got Moon, Jupiter in Aquarius. So this is a super freedom-loving person. And I think maybe, having that aspect of your chart where you're interested in people, clearly, and a very freedom-loving person, the thing that may be holding you back from doing what you really want to do is those naysayers, the people that say you can't do that because of this. And, I think that your bigger question in life should be, why are these people trying to hold me back? Because actually, it might be that they're intimidated by your potential. That's what I can see here. You're obviously going to need a lot of downtime with all that stuff in the 12th house. Make sure that you get time to recharge away from other people. It's important. And that time alone is where you're going to hear some of the answers to the bigger questions that you ask. Okay, so that's La Flora. And Katie, thank you for submitting your charts. And my celebrity that I wanted to talk about is the one and only Billie Eilish, who also has Sagittarius and Aquarius in her chart. Billie, if you haven't heard of who she is like a mega star, literally the biggest selling artist. She's broken records for being the youngest and biggest selling artist. I think she's created a whole new genre, which is, oh man, I can't remember the name of the genre now. Either way, I've written an article about Billie Eilish, so I'll include it below. But if we look at her, she's got 2 stelliums in her chart. She's got Sun, she's got Sun, Venus and Pluto on her midheaven in Sag, and Mercury is out of sign. And then she's got Uranus, Moon and Neptune in Aquarius as well. And I think we really, really see the Aquarius in Billie. Like, she's so like all these different colours in her hair, and she's just full on quirky. This is an adventurous chart. This is a real adventurer. A real freedom-loving person, somebody who really, she's got Mercury in Capricorn, so she's probably going to be a little bit less foot and mouth, but I think she still will have that foot and mouth aspect to her personality. And I think that what's really interesting about Billie is we can watch her growing up, and you can see her probably developing into who she is through the Vanity Fair interviews that have been conducted with her over the past few years. She started when she was 15. She's done it for 4 years on the trot now. And there's something very old soul about Billie. I get very, all of her planets, most of her planets are sitting in Sagittarius, and Sag, Capricorn, Aquarius and Pisces, which are like the most experienced part of the zodiac. That's definitely the old soul aspect of the zodiac. Now, with Billie, I think that you should check out the Vanity Fair interviews. She is a very original. I love it when you see younger people who are just they seem to be very much who they are, and they've got their own idea of who they are. And I admire that, because I think growing up, I didn't have that aspect of my personality. I was very influenced by others. And I always admire and appreciate it when I see young leaders, young people who are very self-assured and very aware of who they are. But Billie has a really powerful chart, because she's got all this lovely stuff in Sag and in Aquarius, but she also has a very dynamic T-square in her chart, which gets activated whenever there's a planet that transits any of those points. And she's had, since she was about 15 years old, she's been having a Saturn transit like most of us do. But when we're 15, we're usually having our GCSEs or our exams of some kind. It's an intimidating time of life where we, have to deal with, making big life decisions about what we want to study and where we want to go. Billie was uploading for a school project. She uploaded a song she'd written with her brother onto SoundCloud, and that song got found somehow. She then was in talks with record companies, and as Saturn transited her midheaven, her career point, it manifested some incredible things for her. And obviously the rest, as they say, is history. She's had her Saturn transit over her midheaven, which has taken a few years, and over those few years she was propelled to prominence in a way that not many people of her age achieve. She's hugely successful. She's broken many records, and she's having some major transits. I will definitely include the blog post that I had for her, that I wrote about her, which I loved writing about her. I'm so interested in Billie Eilish. I don't really know why I'm so interested in her. I just find her very, very interesting to watch. And she's just so young. I think that's the other thing. She's so young. And when you're that young, you can make a lot of mistakes. I know I did. But the problem is she's going to do it all publicly, which is going to be, that's the sacrifice you have to make for being super famous. Anyway, a couple of quotes to end on. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Wisdom is learning what to overlook. And that was a quote by William James that I found online. And I thought that was a really nice Saggy quote, because it's a very wise sign. And, I turn to my sister for advice sometimes when I'm struggling with the issues that I hold on to, with my Scorpio moon being I can't get over it. And my lovely Saggy moon sister will just say, just let it go. It's not worth it. She'll help me see why somebody's behaved the way they have and help me to have a bit of perspective. Sisters, aren't they great? So yes, Saggies are good at letting go of things and knowing when there's something that's just not worth their time and effort. And here we go. Rainer Maria Rilke, the only journey is the one within. I think that can also be quite a nice Saggy story, because it doesn't have to be a journey, an external journey. It can be very much a journey about, and really that is what life is. It is a whole unfolding of events outside us that actually help us to grow and develop into what we are, who we are. Probably the wisest when we're laying closer to our deathbed than to our birth portal. And it's a sad but divine comedy that, life ends when we've really reached a point where most of us have reached a point of understanding and enlightenment. Not necessarily always the case, but that tends to be. And here's one that I've got for my Sagittarians with their with an afflicted Venus. So anybody with a Venus Saturn square, but they've got a bit of Sag in their chart maybe. Sometimes the hardest part of the journey is believing you're worthy of the trip. Sagittarius is a sign. Sagittarius is the believer in some way or another. They believe in something and they inspire us to believe too. So I've enjoyed talking about Sag. If you've enjoyed it, please, screenshot, tag at Stellium Astro on Instagram and share with me. I would love to see that you're listening. If you are interested in being on the show, subscribe to my mailing list. The links are found on my website in the menu. And yeah, if you're enjoying this, if I've shared your details, please get in touch and let me know what you thought about what I had to say. Katie and LaFlora, I'm talking to you today, but obviously anybody that wants to get in touch and share their thoughts over this episode or any of the episodes that I've recorded, please do. I love hearing from people. Okay, that's it for today. Next episode, we're going to be talking about Capricorn. That's my sun sign, so obviously I'm going to be able to have a lot to say about it. And I'll speak to you guys next time. Take care, you lot. Bye.